Joining me now to discuss all of it, Congressman Scott Perry is here. He represents Pennsylvania's 10th Congressional District. Sir, good to have you with us.
Well, Vince, it's great to be with you. I was just listening to the report, and I'm wondering what the cost per hour of a C-17 is and how a campaign goes to pay for one of those. I used to fly some military aircraft myself, and they're wildly expensive because it's not just your average, aircraft. So I'd be interested in that. But quite honestly, I think the war in Ukraine is horrific. Russia has attacked Ukraine. It's trying to gobble up its territory. If I'm a commander, I want to be with my troops. I mean, I hate to say it this way, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it seems to me that this Zelensky guy spends almost as much time out of his country as he does in his country, and his country's in a very hot war.
Well, Scott Perry, Congressman Perry, it's not a mistake that he's in Pennsylvania, though. Pennsylvania is, as every political observer seems to know, the pivotal state in this election. And all of a sudden, Zelensky arrives there as he's insulting both Trump and J.D. Vance. Can he be any more clear about what he's doing?
It seems like, obviously, he's shilling for the Harris-Walz ticket and what they will provide, unlimited funding without any questions asked, regardless of the corruption, regardless of all those tax dollars. Look, we want Ukraine to win. Let me be clear. I want Ukraine to win. I want Russia out. I don't agree with anything that they've done. But we also know that there is no accountability for the billions of dollars that have been sent to Ukraine. And it'd be one thing, Vince, if we were buying just those artillery rounds. But I hope your listeners know you're paying for the salaries and pensions of all the Ukrainian government workers. Like, we can't even afford – understand that every single cent that members of Congress vote for or on in Congress is borrowed. Every single cent is borrowed, and we're paying for their government employees. We can't even afford our own government employees.
Some estimates say that Congress has now authorized upwards of $175 billion of various forms of assistance to Ukraine. And as you mentioned, that involves paying not only for the government, but the pensions of the people within that government. Additionally, CBS reported some time ago that we've been subsidizing small businesses. We're paying for all of the police. We're paying for all the firefighters. We're paying for everything in that country. And the question that's on the minds, I think, of so many Americans, definitely my mind, is to what end? I mean, obviously, I agree with your basic sentiment, which is I want Ukraine to succeed. I don't want Russia to invade them. But how many lives will be lost before this thing can come to some sort of negotiated peace at the very least?
Well, we would like to see any plan for what the conclusion of this is. Like, what is the outcome going to be when we finally said enough? Is it Russia completely out of Ukraine? Look, I would love to see that happen.
Sure.
I would actually love to see Russia out of Crimea too. I think it's all been theft under the at the end of a barrel of a gun. But I don't know this administration's plan to make any of that happen. It seems to me the plan is to just continue to send artillery shells and whatever else is needed to Ukraine, including funding their government and their essential services, for as long as they demand it and as long as this President Zelensky comes over and makes appearances in his Fidel Castro uniform.
Yeah, for sure. So you asked a really important question. What does it cost to operate a C-17 and to fly him around? It's pretty clear to me that this was a publicity stunt at U.S. taxpayer expense. Even if we were to foot the bill, aren't there smaller planes we can use to transport the guy? I mean, I know the military has all sorts of private jets that they fly generals around. Why couldn't we have used one of those instead of a massive C-17 to move Zelensky?
Why doesn't he fly one of his own planes?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, we've given him a pile of them, haven't we?
Yeah, endlessly.
Yeah, I don't know why he has to use do you know, Vince, I don't know if you've ever been in a C-17, but for those of us who have, it's usually how you end up going to a deployment or coming out of a deployment. It is a massive machine with a lot of room in it. Now, I'm sure he travels with his people and so on and so forth, but I guarantee you that there is no necessity for a C-17 to carry Mr. Zelensky from his country to our country. There was no need for that.
But this is pretty explicitly election interference, though, what we're witnessing. So it's being done by the U.S. government. They're bringing Zelensky in. They're trying to convince Pennsylvanians to support Kamala Harris. I remember the last guy who was in the White House being impeached for his conversations with Ukraine as he was trying to establish the extent to which Joe Biden had any level of corruption in that country. Why not impeach Biden and Harris today for this behavior? It's crazy to witness, isn't it?
Well, look, this is a one-sided deal. There's only one side that's criticized. I mean,
Yeah.
Harris should obviously be under scrutiny because she has continued the lie of, an infirm president that really obviously shouldn't be in the presidency.
Yes.
Obviously, the right thing for it to happen is for Joe Biden to not be the president, and Kamala Harris, as much as I loathe saying this, should actually be serving as the president. But she's not going to allow that to happen because then she would own the last 4 years without any question, and she can't be tied to the Biden administration. Look, she's running as an outsider, right? So she's trying to distance herself as much as possible from Joe Biden, having just been, tied to with him at the hip, being the last person in the room and so on and so forth. But look, most Americans get the joke here. The only ones that don't are the completely partisan leftists that are going to vote for a ham sandwich as long as it's got a D before its name.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about how that election is going in your state, in Pennsylvania, being such a pivotal state. By the way, just as by way of correction, I mentioned earlier Pennsylvania, and I casually said that it had 16 electoral votes. I shorted you 3. It's 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. It is such a critical state. How do you see things going? We've seen some early data suggesting that Republican voter registration is unusually high right now in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What are you seeing, sir?
Well, as you said, Pennsylvania remains the keystone state for many reasons, and of course, it's going to be the pivotal state in this election, both up and down the ticket. And I will tell you this, Vince. The people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can't afford their groceries. They're buying them with their credit cards. They can't afford gasoline, electricity, daycare. Heaven forbid they've got to buy a new house or a new car. They are sick of the Biden administration, but they also know that the left is rabid, and so many people have their heads down. They're just trying to be quiet, and I think what they're planning to do is obviously register their discord at the polls. But in the meantime, they're trying to maintain their work relationship, their family relationships by not discussing it. And let's face it, in the last presidential election in Pennsylvania, there were many questions and anomalies based on a brand new law that was put into place and then decisions that were made by people other than lawmakers with no accountability. That law still remains in place. And so, we have things like drop boxes for ballots, for mail-in ballots, spread across Pennsylvania. And as I said before, I think to you, Vince, I don't understand why we've got to have drop boxes for mail-in ballots when most citizens have a mailbox at the end of their driveway, but yet that's the kind of stuff that's still going on in Pennsylvania. So we have to be able to overcome whatever goofiness might occur or has occurred in the past in Pennsylvania by overwhelming the vote for, in favor of Donald Trump. And I do think that people are willing to do that. They just look, Harris has shown them no reason to vote for her. And even if you might disagree with some of the things that President Trump says or the way he says them, you also know with irrefutable facts that your life was better 3.5 years ago. And and so I think at the end of the day, people are going to come to the resolution that there is no choice. You have to vote for President Trump, not only for your own well-being, but for the general well-being of the nation.
And one of the other, there's a lot of issues in Pennsylvania. Certainly, a lot of the country was focused in 2020 on how those ballots were being tabulated and handled in Pennsylvania. One of the issues that I remember at the time was something called ballot curing. And it was Democrat districts in particular. They would receive a ballot, they'd look at it, and they'd go, I don't think the voter meant this. And they'd go back to the voter and they'd say, hey, you want to fix this thing? You want to change it up? And you had elections officials in Democrat districts working directly with voters to change these ballots, to, quote, cure them. Meanwhile, Republican districts, no such thing was going on. Is that going to be the same this cycle?
Well, that's one of the things that we're on the lookout for. It's one of the reasons I objected to the electors pending an investigation of things like that, because, Vince, we're supposed to have one standard in our country, right? If you're going to cure ballots in one county, then you must be allowed to cure them in all counties. And, of course, the Secretary of State, playing for the Democrats, only offered it in some places and not others, which is called disparate treatment or unequal treatment under the law. we're laser focused on that and so many other things in Pennsylvania and across the country to make sure that people can trust and have faith in the fidelity of our election. But Vince, we have to be watching and we have to be working every day, because if we don't, those are the things that are going to continue to occur.
Congressman Scott Perry, finally, on elections, one of the big things that you can control, even if there is nonsense going on behind the scenes, one of the things you can control is turnout, to the extent that you get your people out. I know that some of the conversation, including I think from President Trump on the campaign trail, is like people like evangelical voters and gun owners. It might be a surprise to some. Turns out our low propensity voters don't always go to the polls. What's happening in Pennsylvania to make that happen and make sure people actually show up and cast those ballots for President Trump?
Vince, you're absolutely correct about that. So we are making an effort to go to churches, to go to gun clubs and to gun stores and remind people that their rights and their freedoms and the things that they hold dear are dependent on their voice being heard. And I often tell, look, it's not just gun owners and it's not just evangelicals.
Yes. It's
actually Republicans in general. And I tell Republican audiences, if every Republican that was registered Republican would vote, just vote, we would win every single election. We just need our people to vote. And but you can't go hunting that day. You can't have something else going on. We have 50 days of voting in Pennsylvania. There's absolutely no excuse for your voices to not be heard. And
yes.
So we are doing a lot of what the Democrats have done in the past. We are going out and making sure that those ballots get turned in and that the votes are registered. That's what we're spending as much time trying to convince people that they should vote Republican for all the right reasons, but we're not taking it for granted. We're not stopping there.
Yeah.
We're identifying Republican voters, and we're talking to them to make sure that their voices are heard and their vote is cast.
I love it. And I do see a lot of people who seem very motivated right now to get people out. I mean, here in Virginia, we're doing what we can to try and get people to the polls in a really interesting and close state. My brother's in Pennsylvania. I was just talking to him yesterday, and he's church. I said, are they registering people there? And he said he's going to talk to his Knights of Columbus and see if they can get people registered in the back of the church. So everyone's doing their part. Lots of people coming out to try. Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, sir, thank you very much for your time today.